Welcome to Momentum Moments. I am Brandon Richards, and today I want to start with a question. What are you navigating by? And before that question even matters, there's one underneath it, right? Do you know how to navigate it all? Navigating assumes something most people skip right past. It assumes you know where you are, not just where you want to end up, but where you actually standing right now, today, before you take a next step. A ship can have true north locked in perfect, and it doesn't matter if the crew doesn't know their position. True north just tells them which way is north, and it doesn't tell them how far they've drifted or where the rocks are or whether they've been going in circles for 3 days thinking they were making progress. You can be pointed at the exact right thing and still have no idea where you actually are in relation to it. And most people never ask that question about their own life. What do I actually believe about myself right now, and is it true? They just start walking, and they assume the walking means they're getting somewhere. What you believe about yourself becomes what you do. Not eventually, not someday, but immediately. The belief is the compass, and the behavior is just the ship following it. And you can be the hardest working person alive and still end up nowhere near where you meant to go because you were never off course from where the compass was pointing. You were dead on course. The compass was wrong. And underneath that, you never actually knew where you started from either. And some of those beliefs get written into a person through plain survival, like the body learning to protect itself and just keeping the same pattern running long after the actual danger's gone. And we've already talked about that in past episodes. You should go back and listen. Some get written in a different way through people you trusted, agreements that were supposed to hold and quietly didn't, not once, over and over, and just small enough each time that you let it go until the one thing you actually depended on turns around and gets used against you instead of holding you up. That's the moment trust and truth stop being the same question. You'd have said they were the same thing right up until then. If I trust you, what you tell me is true. And then you find out those are two completely different things, and you were answering the wrong one the whole time. You don't break into that. You bend. Just a little at a time. You let one thing go because holding your ground costs more than letting it slide, and then another, until bending is just the posture your body knows how to hold, and you don't feel the tilt while it's happening. You just wake up one day unable to tell what's actually true about your own life anymore. Not your doctrine, but your own experience. Whether what you're feeling right now is real or whether it's just something old firing off a pattern that has nothing to do with what's actually in front of you, you don't know your own position anymore. You don't even know where you are. And that's the actual danger, not in the wrong direction, but a fixed point to measure your position against at all. Where am I? Who am I? And once you can't trust your own read on your life, you reach for the only measuring stick left in your hand, which is the feeling itself. If it feels true, it must be true. And if it feels wrong, it must be false. It seems like solid ground because everything else already got written out from under you. In Jeremiah 17:9, it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" Now, that's not calling you a bad person. That's telling you how much weight your own internal read can actually hold on its own. The heart reacts. It was never built to verify. And that's why some people carry years of anxiety or depression and believe it means something fundamentally was wrong with them, when a lot of the time it's just the signal doing its job, telling them something needs to be brought somewhere and dealt with. Now, we're not going to go deep into that today. It's just worth saying once, give you something to consider. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 10:4-5, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. And we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Now, in our last podcast, number 21, we talk about strongholds. You can check that out. But what I want to point out in this verse now is captive. We're arresting a thought the moment it shows up and asking it for evidence before you let it run your next move. Most people never do that with a single thought in their entire life. A thought shows up, it feels familiar, it feels right and true, and they just hand it the keys without ever asking where it came from. That's the actual work of getting your agency back. And see, I know this word from my past work experience. This kind of work for other companies, being their agency of record means you're the one controlling what actually goes out under their name, guiding it, making sure nothing gets in front of people that doesn't line up with who they really are. And so your own agency works the same way. You're the one who controls what goes out under your name now, what gets approved and what doesn't. And it's one belief at a time, held up against what God has actually said instead of what you've assumed for years. And let go when it doesn't even hold, even when letting go doesn't make any sense at the time, even when the belief felt protective, felt necessary, and felt like the only thing keeping you upright. Over in Numbers 23:19, it says who God is. And he says, God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. He has said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? In Isaiah 55:11 says, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. People's words move. His doesn't. There's no version of him capable of being anything other than what he already said. In Romans 12:1 says, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And we've talked about that in past episodes also. But I want you to realize that includes what you feel. You still feel the weight of things, and your body still reacts. What changes is you stop handing the feeling the final vote. It becomes information you bring somewhere. An example of this would be Jesus, who wept at Lazarus' tomb in John 11:35. He felt the actual weight of losing his friend Lazarus, grief moving through him in front of everyone standing there. But a few verses later, he's calling Lazarus out of the grave. He was moved by what the Father was doing. The feeling was real. It just wasn't the one driving. And that's what agency actually looks like. You're controlling what goes out under your name based on what's real instead of what's loud in you at the moment. You're arresting the thoughts that don't hold up one at a time for as long as it takes. Now in Galatians 4:16, Paul says, have I then become your enemy by telling you the truth? Paul wasn't asking that as a rhetorical question. He had just told the Galatians something they didn't want to hear, and it cost him. They'd start treating him like the problem, not because he lied to them, but because he hadn't. He'd rather deal sincerely with people and lose their approval than manage what he said to keep the peace. And that's the same choice sitting in front of you the whole way through this. Every time you take a thought captive instead of letting it run, every time you hold a belief up against what God actually said instead of what's comfortable, you're going to feel that same cost. Somebody's not going to like it. A relationship might get harder instead of easier. The old belief is going to fight to stay in charge because it's familiar. And giving it up is going to feel like losing ground, even when it's actually the ground finally becoming solid under you. That's what it costs to deal in truth instead of feelings. It's the only way anybody ends up knowing where they actually are and where they're actually going. I'm Brandon Richards. This has been Momentum Moments. And if you want more of this, you'll find me at brandonrichards.com.